4, 3, 2.
When two guys pull together, it's teamwork. In flower, sunny weather, it's teamwork. What does it take to make an A business climb? You find it takes teamwork every time.
All right, I don't think I can get any hokier than that. Welcome once again to another episode of At Your Service with Haber and Martinez. What we want to talk about today is going to revolve around, a lot of the stuff that I like to talk about, life lessons. One of them is great individuals can always be even better when they're surrounded by a great team. I like to use sports analogies a lot, mainly because I played a lot of sports, but I think sports, especially team sports, are kind of like a microcosm for life in society. We all could name, I'm sure all of us could name great players that are in the Hall of Fame, but never won a championship. And of course, we all know why, because they usually were on bad teams, even though they themselves were great. Bands.
Dan Marino.
Well, Dan Marino he was a great player, but I think he didn't win a championship for other reasons. But anyway, we do know them, right? We know bands. We've got bands like the Beatles and the Eagles, who, when they were together, were fantastic. Certainly the Beatles transformed music, but then they went off on their own, thinking each one was great. And then you have Paul McCartney, who did okay. He had the band with Wings, and he had some songs that he's really still maybe best known for. And then you have John Lennon, who went off on his own, and he's best known for, well, marrying Yoko Ono. But, he wasn't bad either. He had a handful of things, but they were better together. And now you may think, well, how's that going to help me in the law? A lot of people, when they hire a lawyer, they think they're hiring just the lawyer, and they're looking for the best lawyer that they can afford. And that's great. But a really good lawyer understands that he's only as good as his entire team. And sometimes you need other teammates. You need a guy like a private investigator. Private investigators can help a really great lawyer make or break a case. Sometimes it's not enough. We need ammunition. We need evidence. We need things, for example, that a private investigator could help get evidence that will tend to prove what you're saying is the truth. Or a private investigator could help you get evidence that would tend to prove that what they're saying is a lie. And so a lot of times they can help make or break the case. And that's what we've got our good friend Carlos Fuentes here with us today. Michael and I are going to take you through some scenarios that maybe you weren't aware of, that sometimes a PI can help with the case. And also, why is it, Michael, that it's important sometimes to have the PI do the work, even though you think you yourself could do it, or Michael and I could do it, but it's not a very good idea. You still need someone like a PI to do that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Thank you, Carlos, for coming here.
Thank you for having me.
I know unfortunately, this man
for a very long time.
Carlos and I have been working together for so many years.
I know.
And I like to say he is no Tom Selleck, but he is my Magnum PI.
Yes. And the fact that you guys have been working together for many years was the reason that I question his judgment, but I'm still going to have him on
Well,
the
the
show.
good news is he works with a lot of other lawyers too. So he's not just stuck with me, because, a good investigator has a wide fishing net that he can cast.
Absolutely.
Lots of cases.
And he certainly gets you out of a lot of messes. So
That's been historically true, and put me in a few too, which is why we get along so well.
Carlos, you've been doing this for how many years?
35 years I've been doing it.
Wow.
It's all I've ever done. My brother started this, Al Fuentes, back in the day,
Big
and I
Al.
followed,
Rest
Really?
in peace,
Peace.
Gal.
and he started it off going, and from there on out, I went under his wing, and we've grown a very respectful business. We handle,
And now your kids work for you too.
and now my kids are working with it. Yes.
Wow.
So 3 generations of
Yeah.
Fuenteses in Fuentech.
Wow. Now you guys are certified? You have to be
Yeah, we're
certified to
licensed
be?
through the state of Florida. It's a lot easier to get it back probably back then than it is now. Now you got all types of courses and hours and tests and things you have to do to get
Kind
through.
of like you, Ed. You really didn't have to do anything to become a lawyer back in your day.
back then, right?
What are you talking about? You know the wear and tear of my knees? Why do you think I
Thank
can't
God for
walk
those
right?
Russell knee pads. We're already devolving here.
I worked hard to get my license, my friend. Don't kid yourself. That's hard work. I understand you, ladies. So tell us some of the stuff. So you started with your brother, and your brother started how?
So, well, he started actually as an interpreter at the beginning.
Really?
We started as an interpreter back in the early 80s, 1980, 81. And back then it was a niche. I mean, drugs were rampant. Paradise Lost in the Life magazine. And we started off with some top-notch, like you guys, prime attorneys
Thank you, sir.
of their time. And then we started doing their investigations, and it took off from then.
And was it
The money was coming in good.
And I assume back then it was a little more dangerous than today with the drug dealing.
Probably a little bit more dangerous. But, you know, these people that we represent, you know, they're in a pinch sometimes. You know, outside of this situation, they're really great people.
No, I'm not talking about the guys who hire you. I'm talking about the guys that you might have been hired to spy on.
Oh, well, on certain occasions, yeah. Back then used to be a lot of that type of stuff.
Even if it's a family case. I mean, you know,
Well,
if the wife hires you and
you
the
see,
guy,
this is
and the
the
guy's a
only-
drug dealer,
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Willie
Because
Falcone.
that's the only
Hello?
cases
Did anybody say Willie?
the
Anybody
cases
say-
we try to stay away from.
Did you?
There's domestic.
Yeah.
Domestic is the most dangerous. The only time I've ever gotten shot at was a domestic. And I deal with rapists, with drug dealers. You know,
You do a lot of homicide
I
cases.
do a lot of I specialize in death penalty cases. I do mitigation expert work as well for these death penalty cases.
Tell the folks what that is. Just, I mean, it's not a term that you hear every day.
Right. Well, because people's misconception that you do investigation, that you're tailing people, you're chasing wives and stuff like that. But there's a lot more intricacies in the investigation field. As far as death penalty cases go, to do the investigation background, there's two teams, first of all, just to educate the public a bit. When you got a death penalty case, you got 2 attorneys, 2 investigators, and a mitigation specialist. The first team handles what they call the first phase. And then you have the second phase, which handles the penalty aspect of it, the sentencing. And you
That's
have
that's assuming the first team screws up.
Right, correct. We're
They,
the
they
backup,
screw
right.
the pooch. Team 2.
Well,
comes
let's
in.
be fair. Sometimes, you know, you got no chance.
Yeah. Well,
Sometimes
and-
you're a high school team going up against Tom Brady.
right. And,
you
when,
got no
and
shot.
when you say, when we're talking, just so the folks understand also, when we're talking about death penalty cases, these are the worst of the worst. They are
Correct.
capital cases punishable by death in the state of Florida. And when you're in this type of a case that Carlos is talking about now, basically what's happened is the state attorney has represented in writing to the court, we want this person dead. It's not enough that we want him
Period.
convicted. We
Correct.
want him dead.
And actually, one of the, you know, for the lawyers out there that are watching that know who Clarence Darrow is, his biggest and most famous case, he didn't actually win. What he only won was the death penalty phase, which was Leopold and Loeb.
And
they wanted both of those to be sentenced to death because they murdered a child. And Darrow knew he wasn't going to win that case. There was all kinds of evidence linking them. They were going down. His only goal was to get the state not to put these guys to death, which he did.
well,
He was
and-
successful at that.
And in fairness, you know, a lot of those cases, the deck is stacked against you. So,
Right.
you know, when you go into a lot of these, attorneys will actually consider a victory avoiding the death.
Absolutely. Listen,
Sure,
sometimes,
sure, absolutely.
sometimes the case for the state is so strong, but their offer is 25 years. So, you know, a lot of clients are like, if I'm going to lose, might as well go to trial. Again, it would be, in a sports analogy, it would be like me facing a major league pitcher today. And they tell me, well, Ed, if you face him and strike out, we're going to kick you out of the game, or we're going to kick you out of the game either way. Well, I'd rather go out there and swing. I might actually hit the ball.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No.
I just wanted to make sure the folks understood when you're talking about doing death penalty investigative work, this is the highest stakes that we have pretty much in the criminal justice system.
Right.
So
And in
please
doing
go
so,
on.
yeah, and in doing so, when the first phase again would be the criminal side, where you take it to trial and you try to defend that aspect of it. Then the other issue is the second phase, where you have to do a complete history profile, not only of the person that you're representing, but his parents, his grandparents. You try to find all types of psychological and mental issues and upbringings, his boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever he had, teachers, his whole life in the capsules we develop. Our mitigation package alone was probably like 97 pages. And this is something that we created, our own mitigation package back then. And then we've had other doctors that worked with us who's helped us tweak it and ask other questions to raise the bar on it. But once we have all gathered all that data, then we start bringing in neuro doctors, we start bringing psychologists, we start bringing anybody in the
team.
field of the area of the deficiency of the client.
We bring in the team.
Right,
You
exactly.
develop the team. So actually, really, in a way, you're almost like a coach.
Right. I
because
picked the mitigation team outside as the professionalism as far as the doctors is concerned and the experts or whatnot, whether he's got brain damage, whether it's drugs, or the cultural issues,
Can you,
neighborhoods.
I don't know if you can throw a percentage number on it, but if you could, just off the top of your head, roughly, how many times out of 10 do you think it's the lawyer that says, okay, here's what we're doing here, versus you saying to the lawyer, here's what we're doing here?
Be nice.
Be honest.
Be nice.
No,
No, be honest.
Be honest.
Be honest.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, it's a segue right into just how you opened up the show. There's a lot of attorneys that come up to me and say, hey, this is what I want done. And I say, wait a minute, hold on. How about this, and this?
Which is the story of our relationship.
Right.
Right.
And that's how really
And those are the attorneys.
those are the ones that work best.
Those are the ones that aren't full of themselves. Like you, excuse me. No, you guys got it together. The guys that really aren't so full of themselves where it's my way or highway, whatever. Well, then you got to do what the guy wants. And that's what it is. And that's what he wants. And that's not going to stop me from doing my job.
And that's not a good team. Because like
That's
I
not
said
a
in the
healthy
opening,
team.
a good
You still
team,
have the same, you can still have an attorney with the same zeal to want to do what he wants to do, but just has a different tactic. You're right. But it's away from the team effort, just like any pro team. Once you got a coach that's, me, and not worried about everybody else.
What are the best teams? Let's look at football, which is the easiest analogy I can make. Really, if you look at it, the best teams are teams where everybody relies on the other teammate. So like if I'm the quarterback, a good teammate would look at, let's say, the offensive line and say, listen, I don't give a shit how you do it, but you got to block that guy. But that's your job. That's why I hired you, is because you're the best blocker. And I'm not going to tell you how to block, but you better get that guy blocked. And by the same token, you're not going to tell me as the quarterback what reads to make. That's my job. But I better make the right reads because that's what you're relying on.
And you have to be able to adjust during the game, just like a wide receiver says, hey, this is not the same guy we saw on tape. I could beat him on this pattern. Let me run it.
Or you may tell me, Ed, I twisted my ankle. I can't hold that guy for more than 3 seconds.
Exactly.
Well, now I say, okay, I got this. My job is making sure I'm going to do I only got time for 2 reads. So I got to let go of the ball in the first 2 reads. But that's why good teams will communicate. And if you don't know football, I know I just went way over your head.
But that's just the whole just in life.
This is how we're going to talk.
Exactly.
So Carlos would tell Michael or myself, hey, we would say, this is what we want, Carlos. And Carlos would say, listen, I can't get that. Or I looked over here and there's nothing there.
This is the better way to get it.
But have you thought about over there?
So this happens all the time with Carlos and I, where, I'll bring him in on a case and I've got a plan. I know exactly what I want. And I say, look, here's what I want you to do. And sometimes, I think more often than not, Carlos says, okay, great, because I've hit the nail on the head. But there are times where he'll say to me, well, what about this? Or do you really want to do that? Maybe you should think about this. And the first thing I do, I learned at a very young age as a lawyer, drop the ego.
Absolutely.
Because you've got to, if you can't rely on the people that you are paying and that you are counting on to make you look good, you got a problem. So like your football analogy, right? If Carlos says to me that I may not be thinking about this right, or I may have missed something, or I may have miscalculated, or I may have not thought it, I've got to seriously pay attention to that because I know I'm dealing with a guy who knows probably more than I do.
Well, and that's the good thing about working with a good PI as well. I've worked with some PIs who, they may have been good PIs, but they don't understand the team concept. And what I mean by that is they don't understand what it is that I need when I walk into court. What I need from a PI, which Carlos has, it is he knows what I need. What is evidence that I could use and what is evidence that I can't use? Now, I know you've worked with Carlos and I know Carlos as well. Carlos will get us a lot of information, even though he knows this, he probably is not going to be able to use this at trial, but he knows what he's doing. And that works because then like you say, we could just let him go. This is what I need, go. When a private investigator who doesn't understand what the lawyer needs in court is working with me, it makes me work twice. I now have to tell him, this is not only what I need, but this is why I need it, and this is what you got to go find.
And it'll cost the client more too.
Correct.
There are some lawyers that have investigators on retainer, I guess, big law firms, what have you. But, the way we work, the way I work, the way you work, we bring Carlos in, that's on the client's dime.
Correct.
And Carlos is charging them by the hour. So, he's always mindful of not wasting. We have a couple different objectives, right? We want to win selfishly, but we also want to win selflessly. Right. We want the client to win, not just a verdict, or a disposition, but we want them to win overall in every possible way. So part of that is our investigator not taking a huge chunk of change that he's never going to have to use, or spinning his wheels doing nonsense that makes no sense in a given case.
That's why it's important to have an investigator, any investigator you are, not only have the knowledge and the intellect of the streets and what you have to do to make things up, but you really have to have a good grasp on the law. You have to know what the attorney's object is when he's in court. What is he going against? What motions could be coming? You have to think that, because for everything that I do as an investigator, the state's going to react to it. So I have to figure out, how am I going to get something done where they can't touch, or it's foolproof, it's state proof.
Right.
There's stories where there's some prosecutors, you know, the attorneys will tell me every time they see me come in the courtroom, and you know, you do so many cases, and there's sometimes you get a rash of judges that you get a lot of cases in front of. Sometimes you get a rash of prosecutors, right? And this guy would say every time I come in the courtroom, he goes, "Oh, who is this guy? Where is he coming from? Where's he getting?"
But let me tell you something. I always, when I was a prosecutor and I was there for almost 5 years, I always used to tell defense attorneys, and this is what I do now. If you're not a prosecutor, you never were, you may not understand what I'm trying to tell you, but the prosecutors out there get it. We rely, the good ones, right? We rely a lot on the defense attorney. Our job is to do justice, not to prosecute. A prosecutor's job is not to prosecute, it's to do justice. But unfortunately, what does a prosecutor get? His investigator. His investigator's the cop. His investigator is a guy that brings me only the evidence, usually, that tends to incriminate this guy. Not nefariously, not intentionally.
But some of them do it.
Some of them do,
and some of them intentionally.
Some of them do, and
some of them will
don't.
intentionally omit information,
right?
Because they know if they give it to the prosecutor is obligated to give it to the defense lawyer.
Correct.
So if I just keep my mouth shut about it,
right? But even in the best case scenario, you're not going to get the 100% investment into the defense side or into the exculpatory evidence like you're going to get from the private investigator of your criminal defense lawyer. It's just common sense. That's your only job. That's the only thing you're doing is looking. So I welcome defense attorneys who would say, Ed, did you get the ex-girlfriend's phone records? I'm like, I didn't even know there was an ex-girlfriend. What are you talking about?
Why to get it? Yeah.
Yeah. Who are you talking about? Let me show you. Oh, and then you start seeing a bigger picture. So good prosecutors will welcome guys like Carlos, because then I know that, at least when I was there, I know I could go home and I did the right thing today. So it's also important to have these people on there, to have your private investigators work with you.
Well, that's what we try to do as defense lawyers. We try to build what the magic buzzword language, a meaningful and effective defense. And to go back to the death penalty case.
We have a question though.
Sure.
I don't know if you want to go to that first. Do we have a question there?
This is right on point with what you're just saying. Can I hire my own private investigator, or do I have to use the one my attorney works with?
Oh God, that's one I get all the time.
You want to take it? Or
well,
we're
going to field it off to Carlos, but let me just say this, and we'll let Carlos answer. Let me just say this. So I get people who call me all the time, and they say, I have my own investigator I want to use, or I have my own psychologist.
Or my brother, my cousin's gonna,
my best friend, this one, that.
My best friend.
And I always
can
tell them
them
the same thing. There's no objectivity there. Okay. If you're tying my hands and making me use your people, then I'm making you sign off on a waiver so that I'm not going to be held accountable when things don't go the way I expect them to go.
But there's a bigger issue. There is zero attorney-client privilege if you hire the private investigator. Now, if Michael and I hire him, he's protected under attorney-client privilege. He does not. He cannot, even if the state, which the state doesn't do it, the feds do it more often. But if they were to subpoena him, they cannot force him to talk if we hired him. Now, if you guys hired him, he gets subpoenaed, he has to talk. He has to tell them everything he knows, everything you guys talked about, but not with us. So it's a much better practice to let your lawyer hire the private investigator, because then you have control of what's happening.
And that's the legal textbook response, but the practical response
Correct.
On the other end,
which is just as bad.
Your cousin Billy is not going to do what Carlos is going to do.
It's just as bad or worse. And here's another thing to consider. Okay, so now your cousin or whatever that your friend is following around, that friend is going to come in and testify. Now we know that you are friends and that's your cousin, so their testimony is biased. Yes, you hired Carlos, so to a certain extent it's biased. But you know what Carlos has? What I asked him at the beginning of the show. What do you have?
Insurance.
And he has a license.
Yeah.
But he's
So
also
the question is he going to lie and lose that license? Or the other question is your cousin going to lie for you?
He's also got credibility and integrity.
Correct.
And that's another issue. You know, again, when you have somebody who walks into the courthouse for the first time, they may not understand the language that's spoken and the unspoken language that's not spoken.
All the time. Yeah.
And so a guy like Carlos walks in, he reads the room. It's like a professional comedian taking the stage at an improv versus, you know, your first time getting up there and getting heckled by someone in the audience. So,
as opposed to getting heckled in real life on a daily basis?
Yeah, like by every time you and I speak.
Or when I had the show with Madam X, because that was nonstop.
Well, Madam is right. That was the right word there. But Carlos, your thoughts. I mean, I'm sure you get this all the time where people, and actually I've had people who have called me not on criminal cases per
Right.
se, but they want an investigator. For example, I have some friends who are, single in the dating world, and they want to know about the people that they're trying to connect with. And I've given your number to dozens of people and said, listen, call Carlos and, let him do
Have
what
you
he
ever
does.
done it? Looked somebody up and been like, he's been arrested several times for rape.
Yeah, this
Did it really?
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
for sure. I've had all types of charges come on that.
And again, we're not saying that because you get arrested, you're guilty of it. It's just something that,
Well,
you want to know.
Well, you want to know, but I
know
think,
before you go,
I
okay.
think he does a lot more than just criminal background. I mean, you're gonna if I call you to investigate somebody that I'm considering, getting involved with personally, I
Wait,
want to
he's doing
know.
it for you. The first thing he's going to do, if he's got any integrity at all, he's going to
He's gonna
call him and
warn
tell
them
him to
off.
run.
Right.
Run.
No, but I mean, whether
both
it's
of
me
them.
calling you or if it's me referring someone to you, it doesn't matter. The point is, you're not just going to deal with arrest records. You're going to deal with financial issues. Are they in the hole? Do they owe money? Do they have bankruptcies? I mean, these are the types of things people want to know. Also, is this somebody who's going to be able to
Right.
afford to take me to a nice restaurant? Do they
You're
own
so
cars? Do they
materialistic.
own property?
You're
Right.
so
Well,
materialistic.
you want to
It is-
know.
it is
Does
not-
this
it
person
is
have
not, but it's
ties
true.
to the community? Do they have family?
It's
Do they
true.
have relatives? You know,
The number one aspect is not only if they have criminal charges as much, because anybody could get arrested, anybody makes a mistake, and that's what we're here to solve and help.
I mean, even Ed, look, he's got a law license.
Yeah. I lost count. I think it was 4 times,
So, but the
but never convicted.
Well, that's important. You got a good lawyer.
I'm an investigator.
You're welcome.
But a lot of times, if you have kids, especially, I got kids, you got kids, Mike has got kids.
We have
Okay.
a question. We have a question.
Right.
Sorry, Carlos. Don't look at the producer because they'll throw you off. I've seen the producers.
Well, let
hold
me
up.
cap it off
I'm
real
waiting.
quick.
I'm waiting for the signal flares. I got it. We got a question, but
Wait,
let Carlos
finish.
let Carlos finish his thought.
We'll cap that off by they want to know with their economic stability and also where they're from. Because if there's someone that's saying, "Oh, I've been in Miami to a kid 10, 12 years, I've been
Right.
and I do research and find out the guy was in California, just moved in here less than a year ago,"
That's
there's
a bad-
something wrong.
That's a
There's
red
something
flag.
off.
That's a
Big
red
time.
flag.
Especially
Big
if
time.
they're from California.
And we should watch out for red flags. I should have done that with my second wife, but so what? We move forward.
What
we
was
got
our-
a question.
What was our question?
All right, this one's for Carlos. Can I hire a private investigator to tell me about my daughter's new boyfriend? And what kind of information can you dig up about the guy?
Well, that was
we
the
just
question.
kind of answered that right in
I guess
in
that's why
yeah.
the signal
Yeah.
flares, because that was the question that was asked before you
Sure,
got to.
exactly.
But Carlos, if the new boyfriend is my son, just keep it on the.
Well, him, I bring him to the side. If you mess up, I'm going to knock your head off.
If he's your son, that's all you got.
We kind of answered the question, but yeah, we could look into all the aspects of who he is, where he's been, where he's at, and we'll figure out where he's going.
And
Now, what you?
I mean, I did it for everybody my kid went on.
I think I can speak for all three of us here to say that if you're that parent who finds out that your daughter is dating some complete degenerate loser of a kid, and you wind up beating the kid to death by accident or intentionally, we will defend your ass, but we're not going to help you dispose of the body.
no,
That's not going to happen. And Carlos is not going to help you to bury it, but we will help you to defend the charge if you do get
and
picked up.
Michael
on
is
it.
not suggesting that you do that. And even if you do that, you compound it by disposing of the body. We're not suggesting that at all. What we're saying is we will represent you for sure. I don't know if we can defend them though, because there's no defending sometimes what they do, but
Well, it depends.
we can represent them.
You
We can
never know.
represent the hell out of
A
them.
victory doesn't necessarily mean that you got to win a trial.
That's right.
By far,
right.
everybody.
And
The
no,
victory
seriously.
is in the less time as possible.
We're not
minimize.
we're not making light of this because the victims are severely affected. And we understand.
So,
but-
so I would let me hop up onto another area of where how do we use an
there's a
investigator?
lot of different areas.
And
Yeah.
and so I when I engage Carlos, it's usually to help me to prepare the defense, and so it's either because I'm trying to convince the prosecutor that they don't have a case and get them to not file charges or get them to reduce charges. So it's quick up front. We work very hard in that post-arrest pre-arraignment period that we call the pre-file time. But more often than not, because most cases we don't have that opportunity, we don't have the information, and we don't have the time or the luxury.
Or the case, because
So-
a lot of people come later on after they wait till something happens instead of getting an attorney right away. You should get an attorney right away as soon as you're arrested, because those first 21 days is the big difference where you can knock these cases out.
Absolutely. But most cases don't fall in that category. And so we bring you in to do other types of work. And a good example, if we can take a couple of minutes to talk about it, we had a stand your ground case a couple of years ago, you and I. And this individual was arrested and accused of aggravated assault because he opened up his front door while holding a shotgun. And on the other side of his front door were two police officers. And the police officers didn't take kindly to it. And they wound up arresting him and charging him with ag assault on a Leo firearm. We pursued a stand your ground defense in that case. And I brought you on board very quickly because when I went to meet the client and look at the crime scene and have him walk me through it so that I could understand, because when you get arrested, what you get is you get a piece of paper from the police, and the piece of paper is a typed statement of probable cause. And that document should basically seal your fate, right? I mean, if that document doesn't say you are guilty 6 ways from Sunday, it's a problem, because that's what it's got to say.
Yeah.
So our job is to pick that apart, right? So we look through the scene, we dig through the document, and I say to the client, can you explain this to me? Tell me what happened. And as he did, I'm getting a mental image that says, all right, I need Carlos. So I call you, I get you out to the scene, and what did you do?
Well, that's a perfect case that you just picked there, because we really use the investigators as far, to the fullest extent. I mean, we totally basically came in and not degrading the police at all, but we basically came in and did everything they did plus more. We had a full crime scene sketch set up. We measured, we photographed, we took video. We totally reenacted the crime as it occurred, and we even reenacted to the point of where the officers were, and so that we
and we did it in real time, right? At the exact time of night that the incident
to give
occurred.
the prosecutor, the judge, or the jury, if we had to face what they were thinking at that moment, which is very important. The mindset of every person at that moment. And that's how you could, really push through the points that you want to make and have people feel what they felt so they can make an accurate decision on somebody.
I always like to tell my clients, especially when it comes to criminal, but we're going to talk also because there's other things that you can hire a private investigator for in law. And I do family, I do probate. So we'll get to that in a second. But what you guys are talking about here is an example. If I tell my clients, I was in economic crimes as a prosecutor, so I do a lot of white collar cases. And I say, aside from white collar, most of the times the defense attorney is picking holes at the state's case or the cop's case, what they did. But what you guys actually did in this scenario, which sometimes when the state's case is really strong, you have to go here. But this is something you always have to do in white collar cases, is the defense, you guys built a case against the state. It's essentially what you did. Yeah. You guys went out and acted like cops and prosecutors. You went out, you investigated, you created the case, and you showed the evidence. When it's a white collar case, you always have to do that. And that's one of the things I tell my clients. If you're going to hire a lawyer and you got involved in a fraud case, make sure that that lawyer understands fraud cases, because typically in a fraud case, there's nothing to pick apart. There is a paper trail. Yeah. There are bank accounts that have your name on it with the money there. It's not like you're going to say, well, that isn't the real bank, or they made a mistake because they put the wrong address of the bank. No. It is what it is. So how do you win those cases? You need to build a case against them. And sometimes in the regular cases, like what you guys did here, by building a case against the state, you guys put them on their heels. Now they got to defend their actions.
So interestingly, in that
Have
case,
a question?
Oh,
no? Okay.
In that case, we filed stand your ground in that case, and we didn't have a jury. Obviously, we went to a statutory immunity hearing just with the judge, and we put on our case. We put on Carlos. He testified. The defendant testified,
and you put on the video.
Oh, the judge watched
which you
the video.
you can put it because that was a hearing, so you could use it at a hearing.
Right. And ultimately, the judge granted our motion and walked our client, but it was in large part due to the fact that we were able to show the judge more than just what he said, she said.
Right. No, you built the case. You brought the judge a case. And like Carlos said, it is no disrespect to the officers.
No.
They've got a lot of cases. Let's be honest. Most of these cases, I know everybody thinks that the cop, every client, not every, but a lot of the clients I get, right, they always tell you that cop had it out for me. They don't have it out for you, dude. They just
It's too busy
frustrated
to have it out.
and they're tired.
Well, in this case, they had it out. For
Maybe
our
it's
client.
some.
There
It's
was a
some.
personal relationship
It's
that
some,
we
but
were
let's be
able to
honest.
divulge.
Well, this was the exception,
but for the
right?
most
Because there
part, they
was
really
an
don't.
underlying
But let me
issue.
give
For the most part, they really don't. They just have too many cases.
Let me give another example of another case that Carlos and I did last year. Well, right, the year before COVID, 2019. In 30 years of criminal defense practice, I had never gone to trial on a solicitation of prostitution case. I've handled dozens of them, but I've never actually gone to trial on them. The state pretty much offers everybody take an AIDS test, take an AIDS class, and we dismiss the charges. End of discussion. Except my client.
Because usually the guys that get arrested on these solicitation cases are not guys that typically go after prostitutes, especially the ones on the street. Because if they did, they would know that that was not a prostitute.
Well, it goes
The
both,
undercover cop is always way too hot looking
well,
to be a street.
it goes both ways because they do those
You know what I'm
reverse
talking
they
about.
do those reverse stings where the cops go out and pretend to be a John and they
Yeah,
respond
yeah.
to ads. So, but anyhow, this guy didn't want to take a plea. He also didn't want to pony up big dollars, and so we went to trial based on the arrest report and the officer's testimony, and we thought we had a pretty good case. Basically, the crux of a solicitation of prostitution case is the state proving one thing, and that is that the accused offered money for sex, period. So it's the one statement by the defendant, and you would think that the police would record those things because then all they have to do is hit play. They hear the defendant's voice making the offer, end of discussion. But of course, there was no recording. It was just he said, she said. So we went at it. Client didn't want to hire Carlos. Fine. We went forward. We got a hung jury. Came back three to convict, 3 to acquit, mistrial. Rather than throwing in the towel, the state doubled down and said, we want to try it again. And my client said, I want my trial again.
It's like a boxing match. It was a draw, so they want a rematch.
So we go back for the rematch.
You gotta pummel. Sometimes you gotta pummel people.
This time I had to pummel the client and say, look, we want to win. We need to bring in Carlos. And he agreed. And so Carlos, take it away. What did you do?
Well, there were some facts in that case that it wasn't always brought up to light, but I think at one point or another, there was a loss of sight of the client. And so we recreated the crime scene again. I went to every single house I could find to show where some camera work was. That was one other thing, because we wanted to prove that, hey, if you in fact lost sight of this individual, you could have gained them through 20 other houses that in the same pattern that he took to find out who this individual was. The other aspect I stood on a corner and counted every single car that passed a certain corner of an intersection on a busy street.
Just so you know, this
For
happened
3 hours.
This happened on a Friday
times.
night at like 7:30 on a Friday night on Calle Ocho at like 42nd, just off Lejeune. So we sent you out there 3 weekends in a row on a Friday night. You were out an hour before and an hour after.
Did he ever get
cars.
lost for about an hour?
No.
You never got lost for about an hour?
He-
sure?
No,
Okay.
I wasn't
checking.
I wasn't surveilling him, so
5
I can't
minutes?
tell you where he was. But
Our
but-
producer says it would only take 5 minutes. Does she know you, Carlos?
so he
She been talking to your wife.
So he counts cars because the eyeball officer, that's the guy who's watching the undercover, was on the opposite side of Southwest 8th Street. So you got traffic going east and west on a Friday night, like right after rush hour. And these guys are saying they never lost sight of the guy. That was one thing. The second thing was surveillance. I think you found 18 working surveillance cameras on businesses and houses that had line of contact vision, because the cops had a million reasons why they couldn't record, right? Oh, they would have known, it would have been too obvious, people would have seen us. Well, there was clandestine recording going on all over the place, and the cops never bothered to get any.
There were 4 to 5 cameras looking right at the area.
And so
Right at the area.
Carlos got affidavits from all the store owners that at that date, their equipment was functioning, that nobody from the police ever came in and asked for it, and that had they would have happily turned it over.
Let me stop you for a second. So here's a question some of you might have. Why couldn't Michael go get those affidavits? This is why. Because then Michael becomes a witness.
I'm a witness.
Then he can no longer be your lawyer. So you need Carlos because Carlos is the one that has to come in and introduce those affidavits. He's got to testify. He's got to be the witness.
So
this is why lawyers, a lot of times, there are things that you think, well, I paid you. Why don't you do it? Because I'll do it, but then I won't be your lawyer anymore.
there was a third thing Carlos did in that case, and this was the most beautiful of them all, was when they were explaining why they couldn't wire the undercover officer because, they couldn't have any recording equipment on her because it would be too obvious.
Mhm.
And so Carlos, during his testimony, brought in several examples of different types of invisible surveillance equipment that he bought on eBay, okay, that cost nothing.
When I was in narcotics, we used to have a saying about our own detectives that would screw up cases. The cover-up is always worse than the crime. That's a big crock. You know what would have been hysterical if you would have subpoenaed from the same department our narcotics detective and subpoenaed Deuces Teakum and made him come in with the recording devices they use. They get in trouble because they lie.
Again,
they should have just said we didn't have the budget or we couldn't get it.
Well, but
why
that's what
lie?
they say. That's exactly what
but they said we couldn't do it because
they listen. They got a million reasons why they couldn't do it. But
we got a question.
But in the meantime, Carlos was able to come in. He was able to show the jury line of vision issues with traffic counts that were outrageous, hundreds and hundreds of cars passing routinely. Functional surveillance cameras all over the place that the cops made no effort to get to show that my client was actually even there. And then finally, the fact that even though they chose not to do this, it was very easy. And if the officer wanted to, for $12, she could have gotten a brooch pin that would have recorded absolutely everything and nobody would have ever known.
I'm going to tell you a secret right here. If you ever get another prostitution detail where they're arresting the Johns, come see me. I guarantee you don't even have to go through all of that. I'll tell Carlos what to do, half the work, and you will get the case dropped. Well, I can't say it on the air because I'm not telling other defense attorneys what to do. But I will share it with you.
In this case, we got the client acquitted.
Yeah, we did.
This will get acquitted.
They listened to Carlos's test, and the client learned a valuable lesson too. You want to be cheap, you get what you pay for.
Right. Any case, it's always going to be easier for the attorney to work it if we have more money because we have more resources. We have more teammates. We have better teammates. So to give us teammates and resources is going to help. And that's money. I mean, look at OJ. OJ won because it was millions. Forget everything else anybody tells you. It was the jury selection and he had millions at his disposal.
I want to get back to teamwork in a minute, but you said we had a question.
We have a question, yeah.
Yep. I think my sister is hiding assets from my father's estate and the probate case is open. Can a private investigator help me find the asset?
Yes, that's a great example of what I wanted to get into. There are a lot of cases where you can use a private investigator, not just criminal, not just family. You could use it for civil lawsuits. You could use it for probate. You could use it for probate, not just to see if somebody is dissipating an asset. So let's say there's an heir who has possession of an asset, right? Sometimes the courts allow the individuals to hold possession of the asset. So let's say it's jewelry, for example.
But not to dispose of it.
Same
Correct. In family court.
Correct. But another thing that you can use is sometimes, there's a probate case and the court requires the attorney and the personal representative to find all the potential heirs. So let's say there's a big family or even a small family where there's a cousin or a brother who's estranged who wanted to be a Buddhist monk and he's hiding somewhere up in the mountains. The court is going to require you to try to find that person, and that's why you hire a private investigator. So you can hire. So there's a lot of reasons in the law and a lot of different aspects of the law where a private investigator can absolutely
touching on that too, and without naming names, but the lawyer who mentored me when I was a young budding criminal defense lawyer has now worked his way out of the criminal arena, although he still, I guess, does a little, but he really does a lot of high-end wrongful death cases, right?
Correct.
And you do a lot of work for him.
Yeah, I do all
in that
work,
capacity.
the wrongful death, product liability.
So that's kind of like personal injury and product liability. Right. What do you do in those types of cases?
Well, those cases are very difficult to work, and it takes a lot of time and effort to put those cases together. And on top of that, you're dealing with the emotions of the family.
But those are contingency cases, so they're the lawyer's going to pay you out at the end, right?
Not necessarily. Sometimes
you get paid at the front.
You get paid, on both ends.
Okay.
So
you get a little up front.
Yeah,
and then
your
we'll
costs
get some
are
at the
covered
end.
and
Gotcha.
whatnot. But on those cases, you have to do a lot of workup on it. But the benefit of those is that you have a lot of time. The worst has already happened, so now it's just a matter of just developing the information for the family, the assets of the owners, and a lot of times just reconstruct as well the accident and things of that nature.
I got another question for you myself. you and I, over the course of our career, pretty much every case we've handled has been here in South Florida. We did have one case where we traveled to Texas. We talked about that before the show. I'm not going to rehash it, but
No,
You've
too many-
tra-
but it
too
was
many
a good
people-
one.
Too many people get in trouble. That's why.
It was a good one.
yeah, it was a good one. But you've traveled pretty extensively in your capacity as an
No.
investigator. Tell the folks a little bit about where you've been and maybe your most exotic port of call and why you were out there.
You know, it's a beautiful job that I have. I mean, where is it that you have in this world where people pay you to travel and solve their problems? I mean, I am the luckiest guy in the world. For me, it's not a job. I just love what I do, and I love to help people. And it's taken me all over the world. I've been all over Europe. I haven't been to the 7 continents, but I've knocked off 4. Spain and Portugal and all over South America. And I have offices in Colombia too, because I do a lot of drug cases. So the beautiful part of my business is the resolving people's problems, traveling, meeting new people everywhere you go. And it's great. It's not work. I really just.
And what about sitting in? Do you have to sit in cars for hours on end with a camera, like we see the dicks on?
Those
And can I call you a dick?
you call me whatever you want, pal. Fine with me.
It's like looking in a mirror, Martinez.
listen.
It's like looking in a mirror for you.
I'll call me some names. Stand in line.
I've been dying to call a PI a dick for years now.
Well, like I said, PIs are the only occupation on the planet that can put dick on their tax return.
Right there on their taxes.
But real quick, let's go. Real quick, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But to the question that he did, yes, I could help you out with obtaining the assets of your sister for the right reasons, such as probate and whatnot. So we'll find a way to get together on that. But going back,
But again, they would have to hire you through your lawyer, so that he's
Right.
got
listen,
attorney.
for the people who
privilege.
don't want, they say, no, I don't want to hire them. I said, look, go find an attorney and give him $1. Go give him $1.
See, Michael and I,
Get
listen, seriously,
representation.
even if you don't need
Yeah.
us right now at this time, we'll be glad to get involved. So that there's attorney-client
There is
privilege.
very few times that I do work without having an attorney involved, because it's also my protection.
Right, protects you.
I mean, I have to walk a gray line, a legal gray line, and it's sometimes a matter of interpretation.
You know,
So I would need an attorney always.
now that I'm thinking about it, we had a case, actually have a case, it's still open. I don't want to get into any specifics about the charges because I don't want anybody to get any idea of who or what it is, but we have a case, pretty serious violent felony crime, where the state attorney filed the charge against my client without ever speaking to the victim. Correct?
Correct.
And we know that the state attorney never spoke to the victim because the victim reached out to us. And you spoke to the victim and took an affidavit from the victim. And the victim under oath said, I've never spoken to the state attorney in this case, and I never asked for these charges to be filed.
Which is unacceptable. if the victim is necessary for the crime, the
Of course,
prosecutor
that it's
must.
absolutely
The
necessary.
prosecutor must speak to them before filing. I mean, it's just ethical. That's how else can you do it?
And the victim was locatable. Probably not doing well, but he was very
Yeah,
locatable.
but you still got to try. I mean, again, when
No,
when I was,
we're talking about very locatable.
when I was in a special unit, right? When you're in a special unit, you tend to work with the same cops. Right? When you're a pit prosecutor, where you just take the cases that are filed and then they're just thrown on your desk, and you really had no involvement with the investigation, you deal with a lot of different cops and different departments and whatnot. When you get into a special unit, you start working with cops to do just that. So I first was in narcotics. I dealt with just the narcotics cops, and you start getting to know them. Right. And you start getting to know the ones that you can trust, the ones that you know are ethical, the ones that you know are really smart and know
But then
how
you
to
know what you're getting.
But even with them, when I was in economic crimes, because we didn't have a lot of victims in narcotics, but when I got into economic crimes, even with them, they knew that I had to speak to the victim. I could trust you all day long, Michael, but I still got to talk to the victim. I got to be able to look that judge in the eye and say, yes, I spoke to the victim and they want to prosecute. So honestly, that's unethical in my book.
It's horrible.
I don't know if the
And-
Florida
and
bar
we're
would
gonna-
call
we're
it
gonna-
unethical, but I think it's unethical.
I think it's the first case I've ever had, and that's tough for me to say on any aspect.
We'll be dealing with that.
Well, if that prosecutor's watching this show, I suggest you figure out how to fix it.
Well, that's why I haven't said anything about the nature of the offense or anything else like that. But that's something we'll do. The point I brought it up is, this is something that Carlos was absolutely fundamentally important to me, because there was a 0% chance that I was fielding that phone call. Because now all of a sudden, listen, there are some cases where you could be a witness and still turn a blind eye and it's no big deal. But there are other cases where you are a witness, end of discussion. And this is one of those cases.
No, yeah. Look, if victims have tried to call me, and if it's nothing I'm going to use, if they call me and say, "Listen, I just wanted to let you know that he's a good guy," first thing I tell them is, "You understand that I'm his attorney, and this is a criminal case, or especially a criminal case, you can still talk to the victim."
You know where we get this all the time?
But civil is different. You cannot be talking to the other side.
You know where we get this all the time in our arena? And you and I just went through this a couple of weeks ago. Domestic violence cases.
all the time.
It is nonstop where you have a defendant that you're representing and the victim wants you to get this case quashed because they don't want anything to do with it. And you can't represent both. It is an absolute conflict of interest. I don't care how many papers they sign. I don't care how many waivers they give you. You're an idiot if you're a lawyer and you represent both the victim and the defendant in a DV case. So when I got a call like that a couple of weeks ago, what did I do? I picked up the phone and I called my friend Martinez and said, "Ed, the victim reached out to me. I can't speak to the victim. Can you please talk to the victim?" And
no, right. In this case, you didn't want to speak to her because it was a lot.
And I prefaced it by saying, if you represent her, it's between you and her.
Correct.
So if she decides that she wants to castrate my client, that's fine. You do your job.
I told her that. I told her, I represent
evidence.
you, and I need to know if you feel intimidated. Are you here telling me this because they're intimidating you, or you're scared of the defendant? We're not even going to say what the relationship was. I tell her that because it's important for her to know that she can trust me.
So in this case, the reason that I called you instead of Carlos is she needed a lawyer.
Correct.
She didn't need a private investigator.
No.
So if she were a collateral witness, if she were not a victim, then I would have brought Carlos in to take an affidavit, take a statement, provide it to me, and I would have wielded it as a defense.
And just so you know, there's a little bit of a difference here from criminal, let's say, to civil, because in civil, it's the other side is represented. If it's the other side that's represented by a lawyer, you cannot talk to that person at all. If that person calls you, you have to just not take the call. You just can't talk to them. That's just unethical. You can't do that. But in criminal, it's a little different because the state attorney, which a lot of victims erroneously think, the state attorney does not represent the victim. The state attorney represents the state of Florida and is upholding the laws of the state of Florida. They technically do not represent a victim.
They always get ticked off when I do this in jury selection because the state always gets up there and they have their standard, canned voir dire where they talk about, "Oh, and I'm the state attorney and I represent all of the people of
Do
the
they make that face though?
It's horrible.
Hopefully I never.
I'm sitting there
I hope
making
I never made that face.
I'm making that face while they're saying it because it's just I'm throwing up in my mouth.
Well, I never said that crap either.
So, but they do. You've heard
I
it
know.
many times. So
I know.
I always get up there and say, "That's nice. State attorney represents people." So guess what? I represent the people of the United States of America. I represent the Constitution. I represent the 6th Amendment to the Constitution,
Period.
the 5th Amendment to the Constitution, the 4th Amendment, the 1st Amendment. What are you going to do when they pull that hokey crap? You got to pull a little hokey crap out of your own.
That's why I never did that. We got a question.
All right. I got into a car accident, and I think a private investigator from the insurance company is following me. What should I do?
Don't lie.
Drive fast.
Don't lie. If you say if you have
No, she's
injuries,
being
you
followed. By a PI.
Yeah, because you got to do an accident. They want to make sure that the injuries are legit. That's what they're following you for. So if you're lying about your injuries, withdraw the claim. It's a crime. And if you're not lying about the injuries, don't worry about it. If you're not lying about the injuries, do an Eddie Murphy. Was it Eddie Murphy that brought him coffee? I wrote first he put the banana in the tailpipe.
Oh, that was Beverly Hills
But
Cop,
didn't he
right?
bring him coffee the next time?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If they are, you want to chill them? I don't know why people do this. When they think they're being followed, they run. No. Stop the car, get out, and walk up and say, "Hey, I know you're following me." That's it. Right?
And,
if you're
and
a
by the
PI,
way,
and I tell you that I just blew your cover, you're going to keep following me?
by the way, what a lousy freaking PI.
Yeah, really.
Caught by the guy who knows that he's being followed. That's I say the first thing, they need a new PI because that guy must suck.
Or whoever asked the question,
whoever
asked the question needs to become a PI.
I was watching one of those Lethal Weapon movies where Joe Pesci is following him in the red car and they go, "Why is he following us?" And they pull over and they start talking to him and he goes, "Oh, I'm practicing my PI skills." And they go, "Yeah, good choice of vehicles there, the big red truck."
I can't follow people in my truck.
Yeah, well, yours at least it's black. It blends in at night.
It looks like a monster truck. They'll see that from 4 miles away.
Oh yeah, they're obviously.
Well, you know what they say about guys with big trucks, right?
No, I don't.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we need Madam X to answer that question.
And all I know is, you know what I know? Guys who criticize, guys who say that guys with a big truck have a small penis, or guys with a sports car have a small penis, usually tend to be the guys that have the small penis, because I never think of a guy's penis size when I look at his car. That's just me. Are you thinking about it?
Not at all.
I'm not obsessed with guys' penis
Well,
size.
it's just funny because you went from a little Porsche to a monster truck.
Exactly.
So,
So
you know,
go figure.
usually the
guess that
midlife
means-
crisis goes the
That
other
means
way
that,
around.
that means I'm a grower, not
You
a shower.
start with the big. You start with the big truck, and you work your way down to the little sports car.
Ugh. You guys are
So-
great. You guys
so
are great.
I know,
this is like no other show in the world.
Tommy, how
getting
close are we
nervous
getting
over
us
here.
to the hour mark here?
We got 10 minutes.
Oh,
Don't worry,
okay,
I
but
got
we
it.
got plenty
I'm
of-
driving. I'm driving the show.
All right, good. I'm just making sure because a little birdie told me that there may be something, some little special surprise for you.
Oh, is there?
There
Well,
might be. I don't know. I'm not 100% on that.
I'm driving the show just like when I'm with my boyfriend. I'm driving.
All right, sounds good.
So what else? What other work have you done besides criminal,
I've done,
family,
I've done
probate?
the very same case that the caller just did. Right
You
now.
had
I've-
one?
I've done I do work for some large insurance corporations, and when they have doubts in people's claims and whether they're injured or not, yeah, sure, they'll have me follow them and watch them. And I've had all types of stuff. I mean, I've had guys that come out with a flat tire and fix a flat tire, and they're not even just supposed to be in
Has
a
anybody?
body cast.
Okay, but has anybody ever caught you? If anybody ever walked up to you, and been
I
like,
have been. I have been.
know
caught.
you-
Listen, if you can't tell the truth, you're useless. But I mean,
listen, you've been doing it for 30 years. Somebody had to have caught you.
exactly.
Doesn't mean you're bad.
It's-
Somebody had
it's
to.
funny,
Have
no,
when I was
exactly.
in college, I had a job as an apprentice working for a private investigative firm, and that's what they did.
Really?
They had me sitting outside of people's houses. I had midnight shift, so I'd get out at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'd sit in my car until sunrise with a camera, just waiting for somebody to come out and bend over and pick up their newspaper.
Why did
That was my job.
You live.
Because
Why do you have to take pictures of them bending over?
Because that was
See what
the-
I'm saying? It's all sex with this.
that was the claim. Was these were people who were filing claims with insurance companies, claiming they were in a car accident, their back was injured, they couldn't stand, they couldn't move, they couldn't walk. Meantime, they're bending over, mowing the lawn, picking up the paper, whatever. That's all they needed was that one photograph.
In fact, we had a case of which I had to take a certain picture at a certain time. So, the biggest thing of the PIs, the toughest thing is that you spend like 8 to 10 hours in a car at times, and you live for 2 seconds.
right. I don't know
So-
if I could do it.
Right. And that's what they say
I don't know. I
about
could do it.
that's what they say about surveillance. That
Yeah.
that it's
You live for
hours
those
of
two-
boredom for seconds of
for 2
excitement.
seconds.
Once again, it's like my sex life. Hours
And
and
I was-
hours trying to get there, and then 2 seconds.
And I was able to catch a shot from Mike Haber after being in a car for 10 hours.
Which
He
case
said-
was this?
Don't say the name.
I can't tell you anything enough that you would remember that wouldn't disclose something.
Okay.
So we'll talk about when we're off air. But it was a shot that I took that just blew everything wide open.
Even in criminal, it can happen because
Mhm.
if especially when you have he said, she said cases, domestics are a great example. You've got a victim who claims that they're petrified of the defendant, but then Carlos is able to turn up, 27 text messages and, phone calls and
Yeah.
independent witnesses that come forth and say, what are you talking about? This person was just, professing their love for the other. It's just, there's
Right.
always some way.
Well,
If
that-
dig.
That brings up a good point. I was just going to ask you, and I think that you answered what the question I was going to ask Carlos. I was going to ask you, with all these body worn cameras that the cops are now, a lot of the departments are going to, has that made you less necessary? But I don't think so, because correct me if I'm wrong. Now more than ever, we need you because they've got a body worn, and they're going to say this is all there is. What you're seeing on the officer's body worn is all that revolves around this case. But then Carlos can come in and, like you said, go see other people that will have testimony and say, no, what you're seeing on the camera is not all there is. Before that camera started rolling, XYZ happened.
Perfect example. Yeah. I mean, you get to the use of the investigator is instrumental on some of these cases where you speak to one witness and he'll say A hit B. I saw A wound up and he punched him right in the mouth. Then you see the next witness say, I saw B hit A first. Well, because that person never saw the first by A.
Again, like sports, how many times you see it's always the second guy who gets caught. It's never the first one who throws the punch.
Yeah,
that
it's,
gets caught.
look, it's when people explain, well, what does an investigator do on a lot of cases? I try to explain to people, for example, if I had a pen in my hand, if I dropped the pen right here and you're sitting over there and I say, well, what just happened? They said, well, that pen hit the ground. I mean, you just dropped the pen and it hit the ground. I said, well, how do you know it hit the ground? He said, well, I heard it. I said, well, did you see it? No. Well, then how do you know it didn't hit my foot? It ricocheted off the chair, hit the leg of the table, and then hit the ground. So meaning that there's 4 or 5 things that happens in between a case where the perspective of the angle of the witness
Mhm.
didn't see everything that actually happened.
You're right.
And those are, I have
Absolutely
to
right.
3D the case and present it to the attorney.
And one of my pet peeves is when citizens believe that detectives, because they see these detective movies and these novels and these shows where the detectives are immersed in a case and they're thinking about the case 24/7 and they're
Columbo.
scrutinizing. Right, Columbo. That's not reality. Not because the cops are not good, not because they don't care. Dude, they've got so many cases. They can't do it on
Look at
every
that,
single
but
one.
The cops
Some
live it in the
slip
moment.
through.
The cops
Yeah.
are in the moment. I have the advantage of coming after
Right.
and just totally sweeping the whole thing into the center of the room.
But they're in the
Finding people
moment.
who don't want to
They're
talk
in the
to the
moment.
police.
Why? Because they got
You-
this case, and then tomorrow they got another one, and the day after that they got another one.
Carlos and I have one going right now where the police made an absolutely righteous arrest. They did nothing wrong. They just weren't given the video footage that showed that the person they arrested was the victim.
Right.
And we only know this after the fact because Carlos is able to show us video footage that
Correct.
says, well, wait a minute. And now the police are in a position where they have to say, well, if I had seen this video, I
No,
wouldn't have made this arrest.
And it doesn't
Absolutely.
make them bad. It doesn't mean that
They
they were
did
incompetent,
nothing.
negligent.
They did nothing wrong. The cops get an A across the board because they operated on the limited information that they
Goes
had.
back to what I said about a prosecutor and why, when I was there, I really welcomed defense attorneys and private investigators, because you can't. You know, if somebody wants to hide that piece of evidence that you guys found from the detective, how's the detective or the officer supposed to know it exists? He doesn't. He does the best he can. Now, are there some that hide it? Yeah, Michael, but those are the very few.
I
The
agree.
vast majority
I
are really
agree.
trying to do a good job. They're just like everybody else in this system, especially in Dade County. They're overwhelmed. It's just too many cases. So they can't be Columbo on every single case.
Well, let's hope they don't defund us because we need them.
Well, they're not going to defund me. They're not going to defund us.
No, I mean,
They can defund the cops, but if they defund the cops, we're going to have more work. They got to get rid of all incarceration, and then you'll be out of a job. I'll still do family.
what's that? The Purge? What
The
is that?
Purge.
Yeah.
I'll still be doing family cases, civil cases, probate cases. Family cases, actually, divorces will probably go through the roof if they start, if they do away with incarceration. I know a lot of guys that are going to get stabbed in the eye by their wives.
while they're sleeping.
Well, maybe not.
Battered woman syndrome. That's when we have the capital case and we need the second team to come forward and
Exactly.
build that defense.
Okay. What other cases? Anything else you want to let us know? What other kind of stuff do you do? That any other cases?
We've touched a lot of issues.
We've touched a lot.
Personal injury. We've
I'm-
touched the wrongful death. We touched the criminal, the probate, family.
Well, since you opened, let me wrap us up by
By all
going back
means.
to your initial theme of teamwork
Yes.
and how important
Just don't bring up the
is.
Wonder Pets,
And
because
so,
I swear
Tommy,
I'm gonna punch you in the
think-
face with
I
that
think
baseball.
that-
Oh, that's it, Carlos.
I
Hold me
think-
back.
Here comes the
Herbie,
curveball.
hold me back.
I
Do
think
not.
we have something here just for you, Ed, because you love this so much
my God.
when your daughter was young.
No! Stop!
It's all about
Stop.
teamwork.
I'm turning into the Hulk. I'm about to break something. Stop this. I feel like Malcolm McDowell. All I need for you to pump up my eyes.
What's gonna work?
And what is it? Clockwork
Teamwork.
Orange. When they force him to Okay, so as we're fading out, the joke is this. My daughter, when she was little, every Saturday would make me wake up at like 7 a.m. to watch this every single weekend. And I swear, to me, it seemed like they only had 4 episodes. I kept seeing the same damn thing. The dinosaur that they got to save and the penguin that they got to save. It was the same thing every time, but she loved it. So I had to sit there and watch
I'd
it.
like to say something in closing. I like to think that you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you, sir.
You're opening a different aspect to the people out there as to discuss law in a round table in a very calm environment, fun environment,
You had fun?
and educational. It's great. Everybody out there is learning. It's great to be with you guys. And you guys are doing a hell of a job.
Thank you.
And everybody behind the screen back there as well.
Thanks
you,
for
brother.
coming. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, our secret producer.
We won't be on next Monday because it's
Memorial
Day.
Now, for the record, we would have been here.
We would.
We would have been here.
We would. But, you know, these guys, this Grant is the Nazi that won't let us come on.
Well,
So if you have a problem, it's with Grant.
he's going to be celebrating, doing his patriotic duty,
Yeah.
having a barbecue somewhere.
Exactly.
That's
Did he
okay.
invite you?
No,
He didn't invite me.
Well-
I bet he didn't even invite his brother. Grant probably didn't even invite Michael.
Well, maybe he'll bring some power pizza next week.
I want whatever he's cooking. I want him to bring that on Monday. We'll see you the following Monday here on At Your Service with Haber and Martinez.